Hey guys, tonight we slip into Rome's darkest palace. Torches flicker, wine spills like blood, and behind marble walls the emperor laughs, while his guests choke on their own fear. You walk through the marbled corridors of the Palatine Hill. The air is thick with incense and unease. Rome has crowned a new emperor, Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, nicknamed Caligula, the Little Boots. At first, the empire rejoices. He is the son of a beloved general, the child who once walked among the legions in miniature armor. Senators praise him as the return of Rome's golden age. Coins are struck with his smiling face. Crowds chant his name as if he were a god reborn. But beneath the acclamation lies a shadow. His childhood was marred by blood. His father poisoned. His mother exiled. His brothers executed. He alone survived, raised in palaces where whispers of betrayal echoed louder than lullabies. Historians debate whether this haunted him or hardened him. At first, his reign brings hope. He frees prisoners, restores exiles, and stages lavish games for the people. Rome cheers, believing a new Augustus has risen. Yet power once tasted begins to twist. His generosity shifts into excess. Banquets stretch from night into dawn. Wine flows until the Tiber itself seems red, and soon the whispers begin. Senators notice his gaze lingers too long, his laughter sharp as glass. At feasts he toys with nobles, demanding their wives or mocking their loyalty. The court, once elated, begins to fear. Then illness strikes. Some say it was poison, others epilepsy. For weeks Caligula hovers near death. When he rises from his bed, he is changed. Gone is the hopeful young ruler. In his place stands a man obsessed with cruelty, lust, and power unchecked. Rome holds its breath. The emperor is alive, but the empire will never be the same. You walk deeper into the emperor's residence, the Palatine Palace. Once a place of marble order and imperial dignity, it now pulses like a fever dream. Caligula has turned it into a theater of excess. Banquets stretch endlessly, not for hours but for nights. Golden couches are arranged in circles, laden with dishes so rich the very air smells of roasted meat, honey, and wine. Guests are commanded to eat until their stomachs ache, then mocked if they hesitate to take more. Slaves fan the tables with peacock feathers, their eyes hollow as they watch nobles tremble with each command. The emperor drapes himself in silks, sometimes in the armor of a god, sometimes in women's robes sewn with gems. His laughter is sharp, echoing through the marble halls as he demands impossible performances. Senators forced to dance, matrons ordered to sing like courtesans. Refusal is death. Compliance is humiliation. Historians still argue whether these accounts were exaggerations, crafted by enemies after his fall. But the details linger. Orgiastic feasts where incest was whispered, where guests were summoned to watch the emperor embrace his own sisters under torchlight. Suetonius, the gossip of Rome, swears it was true. Others dismiss it as slander. The truth, lost in shadows, is perhaps more chilling. What mattered was not the deed itself, but the fear he inspired by making people believe it could be real. Caligula delights in blurring lines. He calls himself Jupiter reborn, then Dionysus, then Venus. At times he struts naked through the halls, demanding worship as a living god. Statues of Rome's deities are brought to the palace, their heads replaced with his own likeness. Priests bow, unsure whether to laugh, pray, or weep. Yet the people still cheer. Bread flows from the treasury. Games fill the amphitheaters, and gladiators die for his amusement. The mob adores him because he feeds them. The Senate loathes him because he humiliates them. In this divide, Caligula thrives. At one infamous banquet, roses rain from the ceiling. Petals fall in thick clouds covering the tables, burying the guests until laughter turns to coughs, coughs to gasps. Some claim men and women suffocated under the perfumed avalanche, while Caligula strummed a lyre and smiled. Whether myth or memory, the story captures the truth of his reign. Pleasure and cruelty fused, beauty and horror indistinguishable. And as night deepens in his palace, one begins to wonder, is Rome ruled by a man or by a nightmare in human flesh? The Colosseum has not yet risen, but Rome's arenas thunder with the sound of blood. Caligula, intoxicated by power, transforms the games into spectacles of cruelty far beyond the traditions of his predecessors. You walk into the amphitheater, the air alive with the roar of tens of thousands. The crowd hungers for death, but Caligula hungers for something darker. Humiliation, degradation, the transformation of human suffering into art. He orders executions staged as theater. Prisoners dressed as mythic heroes are cast into the sand, forced to perform their fates. One man plays Orpheus, lyre in hand, until wild beasts tear him apart as the audience howls. Another is Daedalus, strapped into contraptions meant to mimic wings, launched from a platform only to crash into the arena floor, bone splintering while Caligula laughs. The emperor does not simply watch, he directs. Like a playwright of torment, he commands each scene, ensuring it shocks, unsettles, overwhelms. To him, cruelty is not accident but art. When gladiators displease him, he orders them slaughtered without contest. When the crowd tires, he turns his gaze upon them. Suetonius whispers that on one afternoon, bored with the pace of the games, Caligula gestured to the stands and commanded random spectators dragged into the arena. Mothers, merchants, slaves, all torn apart by beasts as the emperor smiled, proving that in Rome no one's life was safe from his whim. Historians debate the truth. Was it exaggeration? Was it slander, perhaps? But what matters is that Rome believed it, and fear is as sharp a weapon as steel. Even animals were not spared. Exotic creatures dragged from Africa and Asia, lions, leopards, even giraffes, were starved and unleashed, only to be butchered in spectacles of horror. For Caligula, it was proof Rome could dominate not only nations but nature itself. The people cheer, but unease grows. These games are no longer entertainment, but demonstrations of absolute power. Death is not simply displayed, it is orchestrated. Every scream echoes the emperor's will. At the end of one spectacle, Caligula rises from his throne, clad in purple and gold. His eyes sweep across the arena, settling not on the fighters but on the crowd itself. A silence falls heavy and suffocating. For in that gaze, every Roman feels the same chilling truth. Here is a ruler who does not see subjects but playthings, and the games of Caligula have only just begun. The night air in Rome is heavy with incense. Statues of Jupiter, Venus, and Mars gleam in torchlight, their stone eyes unblinking. But soon they no longer resemble the gods. Caligula has ordered their heads severed and replaced with his own likeness. Marble bodies of deities now bear his face, a mockery of faith and a proclamation of divinity. You walk through the temples. Priests kneel, their voices faltering as they chant prayers not to Jupiter, but to Caligula. He demands sacrifice as if he were God incarnate. Oxen are slaughtered, wine poured onto altars, and the emperor himself receives the offerings. The line between worship and ridicule blurs, but none dare resist. He strides into the Senate draped in a golden robe, declaring himself not merely ruler of Rome, but of heaven and earth. Some days he is Jupiter, thunderbolt in hand. Other days he is Venus, parading in women's silks with jewels glittering in his hair. Senators bow, forced to clap, their faces frozen masks of obedience. Behind their eyes, resentment coils like a snake. Caligula revels in the theater. He builds a bridge of boats across the Bay of Baiae, a 2-mile floating path, so that he might ride his horse across the sea like Neptune himself. Crowds gather astonished as the emperor in armor of gold trots over the waves, proclaiming his dominion over nature. Historians argue whether these events were real or exaggerated. Was the bridge a feat of engineering or a madman's vanity project? What mattered was not practicality but spectacle. For Caligula, the empire itself was a stage, and he its eternal star. Even his beloved horse Incitatus became part of the performance. He lavished the animal with a marble stall, purple blankets, and golden feed buckets. Rumors claim he planned to make the horse a consul, mocking the Senate by elevating a beast to their ranks. Whether true or jest, the humiliation was the same. Rome's rulers were no longer chosen by virtue, but by Caligula's whim. The people watched in awe, half terrified, half enthralled. For in Caligula's reign, the emperor was no longer man or god, but something more dangerous, a fusion of both, accountable to neither. And as incense thickens in the air, one truth burns clear: Rome has not crowned an emperor. Rome has crowned a deity in human skin. Behind the gilded doors of the Palatine Palace, the torches burn low. What happens here rarely reaches the ears of common Romans, yet rumors spread like wildfire, whispered in taverns, etched in secret scrolls. For Caligula's pleasures are as infamous as his cruelties. You walk through shadowed halls hearing laughter, too loud, too sharp. The emperor does not merely host banquets of food and wine. He stages feasts of flesh and desire. Nobles are summoned with their wives and daughters, and no woman is safe from his gaze. Some accounts claim he took them openly, at the very tables where their husbands sat powerless. Others insist he returned afterward to mock the men, asking which act pleased them most. The darkest whispers tell of his sisters, Drusilla, Julia Livilla, and Agrippina. Ancient sources claim he shared their beds, parading them at banquets as if they were empresses. Was it truth? Was it slander penned by enemies after his fall? Historians still argue, but what matters is the fear it inspired, the violation of every boundary Rome once held sacred. Even marriage becomes theater. Caligula weds not for love, not even for politics, but for shock. He steals brides on their wedding night, divorces wives within days, and boasts that fidelity is a joke. His cruelty is not in desire alone, but in the way he forces Rome to watch, to gasp, to accept. In one infamous tale, he turns the palace into a brothel. Noble women are forced to stand in chambers draped with gold, their bodies offered for coin, while the emperor pockets the fees. Senators aghast whisper of the disgrace, but none dare refuse. To resist is to die. The palace becomes less a court than a stage of forbidden fantasies, where power and lust entwine until indistinguishable. Every boundary, of family, of law, of decency, is blurred beneath his laughter. Suetonius, the chronicler of scandal, records these tales with relish. Some modern scholars doubt them, arguing exaggeration, propaganda crafted by those who hated him. Yet whether truth or invention, the image remains etched in history. Caligula, the emperor who turned Rome's most sacred halls into a theater of desire. And as petals fall from ceilings, as music swells and guests choke on both roses and shame, one chilling thought lingers. The empire itself has become his bedchamber, and all within it, unwilling partners to his pleasure. The palace corridors gleam with polished marble, but their shine hides the stains of fear. Caligula has perfected the art of unpredictability. No man, no woman, no senator or soldier knows when the emperor's smile will shift into a death sentence. You walk into the Senate chamber. The marble floor echoes with the shuffle of sandals as senators bow low, trembling before the emperor's arrival. Caligula enters not as a ruler of state, but as a performer. Sometimes he appears in golden armor, other times in the robes of a goddess, jeweled veil across his face. Each entrance is a test. Would they laugh, applaud, kneel? The wrong reaction could mean ruin. He delights in humiliation. A senator stumbles over a phrase, and Caligula orders his fortune seized, his family auctioned off to the lowest bidder. Another dares to pause before applauding, and guards drag him into the shadows, his screams muffled by stone walls. Soon applause comes quicker, louder, but never safe. Historians whisper of cruel games, the emperor dining with nobles, then casually asking, "Shall I have him executed or spared?" while pointing to a guest at the table. Guests, pale with terror, would beg for mercy or in fear nod for death. Either choice was wrong. Sometimes the victim was spared, sometimes killed, but always the room learned that lives depended not on justice, but on the emperor's whim. Caligula even mocks the gods of fortune. At gladiatorial games, when the crowd cries for mercy, he signals death. When they beg for blood, he spares the fighters, sneering at the masses as their voices falter. He is no longer a man obeying Rome's traditions. He is a god reshaping them. Fear seeps beyond the Senate. Merchants whisper that soldiers disappear after jokes told too loudly. Housewives murmur that nobles vanish in the night, their estates claimed by the crown. Rome itself becomes a stage, and every citizen an actor terrified of missing their cue. Yet through this reign of terror, Caligula radiates delight. To him, fear is loyalty made visible, obedience written in trembling hands and quivering voices. He rules not through laws, not through armies, but through the theater of dread. And as you watch senators bow so low their foreheads strike marble, one thought chills your spine. Rome is not governed. Rome is held hostage by a smile. The line between theater and reality blurs. In the palace, laughter rings at midnight, but it is laughter tinged with dread. Caligula no longer acts like an emperor playing at divinity. He believes he is one. You walk into a vast hall where torches burn with perfumed oils. At the center stands Caligula, clad in shimmering robes, his face painted, his eyes wild with fever. He proclaims himself not only Jupiter, king of gods, but also Bacchus, god of wine, and Venus, goddess of love. His voice carries echoing against marble, daring anyone to deny him. None do. He commands temples be built in his honor. Statues of himself rise in Rome and in distant provinces, offerings laid before them as if he were immortal. When priests hesitate, he mocks them, forcing them to bow, to sacrifice animals, to sprinkle blood on his feet as if he were divine. The air reeks of iron and incense, but madness coils deeper. He declares war on Neptune, god of the sea. Legions march to the shore, armor gleaming under the sun. Trumpets sound, yet there is no enemy. Caligula orders his soldiers to thrust their spears into the waves, to slash at the surf, to collect seashells as spoils of war. They obey, bewildered but silent. The shells are carried back to Rome in triumph, paraded as trophies, while the emperor rides at their head, basking in victory over the ocean itself. Historians debate, was this lunacy or was it satire? Was Caligula mocking Rome's endless wars, or had he truly lost himself? The truth dissolves in time, but the image remains. A god-emperor waging battles against the sea. Even his beloved horse becomes a symbol of his madness. Incitatus, dressed in purple and fed oats mixed with gold, is granted a marble stable, servants and attendants. Rumor claims Caligula planned to make the horse consul, placing it among Rome's highest officials. Perhaps it was jest, perhaps humiliation, perhaps the ultimate proof that senators meant less to him than beasts. To his subjects, madness and cruelty fuse until indistinguishable. He orders executions for the smallest slights, rewards for the most absurd flattery. A nobleman once praised the emperor's voice as divine. Caligula forced him to listen to endless songs until his ears bled. Another remarked on his beauty. Caligula had him scarred, sneering that no man should rival his face. Rome, once proud of its emperors, now whispers in taverns of insanity cloaked in purple. Some pity him, saying illness or poison destroyed his mind. Others insist madness was always within him, merely unchained by power. But as night deepens in the palace, as the emperor sings to himself in halls lined with roses and blood, one truth chills all who live under his reign. When power is absolute, madness is no longer weakness. Madness becomes law. The palace, already heavy with incense and whispers, grows darker still when Caligula turns his cruelty inward, toward blood, toward family. You walk through the private chambers of the Palatine. Behind silk curtains, the emperor dines not only with senators and courtiers, but with his own sisters, Drusilla, Julia Livilla, and Agrippina. To the Roman people, family ties are sacred. To Caligula, they are threads to twist, break, and knot into something unholy. Drusilla, the eldest and most beloved, becomes his shadow. Ancient writers claim she was not merely sister, but lover, paraded before Rome as though she were empress. At feasts she sits beside him, dressed in jewels, her hand lingering on his arm as whispers ripple through the hall. When she dies suddenly, fever, poison, or exhaustion, no one knows, Caligula orders the empire to mourn her as though she were a goddess. Temples are built, sacrifice is made. He weeps in public, yet in private his grief hardens into fury. Some say her death snapped the last thread of his reason. His other sisters fare worse. Julia Livilla and Agrippina the younger, destined to be mother of Nero, become pawns in his cruel games. He forces them into banquets where their dignity is stripped, humiliates them before nobles, and accuses them of treason when their loyalty falters. Exile follows, laced with the threat of death. Their names are dragged through mud, their lives broken under the weight of his paranoia. Even his wives, taken and discarded like robes, suffer his whims. Livia Orestilla, stolen on her wedding night from another man, is cast aside within days. Caesonia, his last wife, is mocked for her plainness, yet becomes his obsession. She appears at banquets draped in pearls, riding beside him in chariots, bearing a child whom he parades as the heir of gods. Their fate, too, will be entwined with his downfall. Family to Caligula is not sanctuary, but stage. Blood ties are props in the theater of fear, and intimacy is only another weapon. Historians debate how much is true. Were the tales of incest, humiliation, and betrayal exaggerations of scandalous scribes? Perhaps. But even rumor becomes reality when fear makes men believe anything of their ruler. In Rome's marble halls, where once emperors honored ancestors and lineage, Caligula desecrates kinship itself. Love turns to spectacle, grief to domination, family to ashes. And as the emperor stalks the palace, torchlight casting monstrous shadows on painted walls, one truth hisses through every corridor. If even blood is not safe, then no one in Rome is. Rome itself begins to mirror the madness of its emperor. Streets once alive with festivals and trade now hum with unease. The people still cheer when Caligula throws open the granaries or scatters coins from his chariot. But their cheers are hollow, trembling beneath fear. You walk through the markets of the Forum. Merchants whisper of new taxes, levies on lawsuits, on weddings, even on the wages of soldiers. When the treasury runs dry from his endless banquets and games, Caligula invents crueler schemes. Noblemen awake to find their estates seized, their daughters summoned to the palace. Widows are stripped of dowries, temples looted of offerings, even the sanctuaries of gods plundered to feed his hunger for spectacle. The emperor prowls the city disguised in simple robes, listening for insult. A merchant who mutters of empty shelves is dragged into chains by nightfall. A soldier who jokes of the emperor's madness disappears, his body never found. Fear clings to the streets like fog, every shadow a spy, every ear a trap. In the Senate, humiliation grows unbearable. Caligula forces nobles to run beside his chariot, to kiss his feet, to praise him as Jupiter reborn. He confiscates fortunes at whim, forcing Rome's proudest families into beggary. Senators wear rags beneath their togas, their eyes hollow, their voices servile. The people, too, are not spared his cruelty. At the games, when crowds beg for gladiators' lives, Caligula commands death. When they thirst for blood, he spares the fighters, mocking their hunger. "So you think you are gods?" He jeers from his gilded seat. "I alone decide life and death." Rumors spread that he plans to move the capital east, to Alexandria, where he would be worshipped as a living pharaoh. Rome, the eternal city, would be abandoned like a used stage prop. Senators pale at the thought. The people whisper in outrage. For if Rome is not the heart of the empire, what is left of their pride? Even the legions once loyal begin to chafe. Soldiers march not to defend borders, but to indulge the emperor's whims. They fight seashells instead of enemies, parade in absurd ceremonies, their valor mocked by the very man they swore to serve. Loyalty cracks, and cracks are fatal in an empire built on power. The empire suffocates. Bread is scarce, coins debased, dignity shattered. Rome itself feels less like a city than a prison, its people bound by fear, its nobles broken by humiliation. And yet Caligula laughs, for to him suffocation is proof of power. The empire gasps and the emperor sings. The empire groans beneath the emperor's weight, and in the skies above omens flicker like warnings from the gods. Comets blaze across the heavens. Earthquakes rattle distant provinces. In Rome itself, lightning strikes the temple of Jupiter. Priests whisper of curses, of divine wrath, of a ruler who has overstepped the boundary between man and God. You walk through the city at night. Citizens huddle in doorways, murmuring prayers not to Caligula, but to the old gods he has mocked. In taverns, men lower their voices, swearing they saw visions, blood dripping from statues, the Tiber running red at dusk. Superstition, perhaps, but fear makes even shadows feel real. Inside the palace, Caligula scoffs. He mocks the priests, orders sacrifices doubled, demands temples to himself expanded. If the gods are angry, he sneers, then let them strike him dead. He struts through sacred halls barefoot, draped in golden robes, daring Jupiter himself to defy him. The priests bow, but behind their eyes they tremble. His cruelty only grows. At one banquet he laughs that he could order every guest executed with a single nod. At another, he boasts that he holds the lives of all Rome in his hand, and that no man can draw breath without his leave. His courtiers laugh nervously, praying he does not test his jest. Historians record that his paranoia deepens. He surrounds himself with guards, yet trusts no one. He suspects senators, generals, even family of plotting against him. Perhaps they were. Perhaps he merely imagined it. In either case, suspicion becomes a blade sharper than steel. Meanwhile, famine stalks the provinces, and soldiers grumble on the frontiers. Rome's enemies watch with sharp eyes, but it is not foreign armies that threaten the empire. It is Rome's own heart, bleeding beneath the madness of its emperor. In the Senate, whispers grow bolder. "He is no god," mutter the nobles. "He is a disease." Some speak of removal, of salvation through blood. But to plot against a god emperor is to risk annihilation. And yet desperation sharpens courage where reason fails. The omens of doom are not only in the skies, they are in the stones of the palace, in the hollow eyes of senators, in the trembling hands of guards who serve with loyalty fading. The empire waits, holding its breath. For in Rome, when emperors turn monsters, history answers not with patience, but with daggers. The palace glitters under torchlight, but behind its marble walls shadows weave a plan. Senators weary of humiliation gather in whispers. Generals ashamed of mock campaigns against seashells and waves mutter of honor lost. Even the Praetorian Guard, once bound to the emperor by oath, begins to bend beneath the weight of resentment. You walk through the corridors of power at night. A handful of men huddle in secret chambers, voices hushed, eyes darting to the doors. Among them is Cassius Chaerea, a commander of the Praetorian Guard. Caligula mocks him cruelly, calling him weak, taunting his manhood, forcing him to speak in a high-pitched voice before the court. The insult festers into hatred. Hatred sharpens into resolve. The plot takes shape, an assassination in the very heart of the palace. No battlefield, no rebellion, just a dagger well placed at the right moment. The conspirators swear silence, but their hearts pound with both fear and exhilaration. To kill an emperor is treason. To kill Caligula, they whisper, is salvation. Meanwhile, Caligula struts unaware or perhaps uncaring. He mocks senators in public, flaunts his godhood in temples, and drowns the empire in debt with endless games. He believes himself untouchable, a living deity immune to the daggers of mortals. His arrogance blinds him, or perhaps he revels in daring fate itself. Rumors seep beyond the palace walls. Citizens whisper of plots, of destiny shifting. Some pray for his death. Others tremble at the thought of chaos that might follow. Rome is a city on edge, its heartbeat quickening, its breath shallow. The day is chosen, the festival of Palatine Games, when Caligula will leave the theater and walk the covered passageways of the palace. The conspirators wait, blades hidden, faces calm. Each step of the emperor brings him closer to his fate. Historians argue whether Caligula sensed it. Did he dream of betrayal? Did he laugh at the possibility? Or did he, in his madness, welcome it as the final act of his theater of fear? The stage is set, the daggers gleam in shadows, and Rome itself holds its breath. The morning begins like any other. The emperor surrounded by guards, the palace echoing with the rustle of silk and the clatter of sandals on marble. Caligula struts through the corridors after attending the games, his mood bright, his laughter sharp. He speaks of new spectacles to come, perhaps a war against the gods themselves, perhaps the marriage of his horse to a senator's daughter. None dare question him. You walk with the procession into a narrow passageway beneath the Palatine, the vaulted ceiling heavy with shadows. Torches flicker. The air grows still. Among the guards walks Cassius Chaerea, his hand trembling not with fear but with anticipation. Caligula pauses to speak. his words mocking as always. He sneers at Chaerea, calling him names meant to strip him of manhood, to remind all present of his humiliation. The insult hangs in the air like poison. Chaerea's hand tightens around the dagger hidden beneath his cloak. Then steel flashes. The first blow lands hard, deep into the emperor's neck. Caligula gasps, his eyes wide not with fear but with shock, as though the thought of death had never once crossed his mind. He stumbles, hands raised, blood staining his golden robe. The others strike. Daggers plunge into his chest, his belly, his limbs. Guards once sworn to protect him now join in the frenzy, their blades eager, their faces twisted with long-suppressed hatred. The marble floor grows slick with imperial blood. Caligula collapses, still alive, still choking, his voice rasping as if to curse or to laugh, but the final thrust silences him. The god-emperor lies broken, not in a temple, not on a throne, but in a dim corridor. Slain like any mortal man, chaos erupts. Some flee, terrified of what comes next. Others rejoice, whispering that Rome is free at last. But blood calls for more blood. Caesonia, his wife, is cut down. Their infant daughter is dashed against the wall. The dynasty of madness is purged in one brutal sweep. Historians debate the details. How many blows struck him? Who dealt the final cut? Some say 30 wounds pierced his body. Others claim it was fewer but deeper. All agree on one truth. In January of the year 41, Caligula's reign ended in violence as spectacular as the terror he had unleashed. And in the silence that follows, Rome shudders. For the god is dead, but gods once slain leave only shadows, and the empire must now decide if it is free of him or forever haunted. The emperor lies dead, his blood soaking into the marble, but Rome does not rejoice in peace. Instead, the city convulses, uncertain, trembling on the edge of civil war. You walk the streets of Rome in the hours after the assassination. Rumors race faster than footsteps. Caligula is slain. Some whisper in relief, others in terror. For when a god-emperor falls, who commands the empire? The Senate seizes its chance. Many nobles, long humiliated, call for the restoration of the Republic. No more emperors, no more tyrants. They dream of a Rome ruled once more by senators and laws, not by one man's whim. In the Curia, voices rise in hope and anger, declaring the age of Caesars at an end. But outside those walls, soldiers sharpen their swords. The Praetorian Guard, stained with Caligula's blood, now must decide, were they liberators or traitors? Their loyalty splinters. Some stand with the Senate. Others cling to the memory of imperial power. Tension thickens like smoke. Then a discovery changes everything. Hidden within the palace, trembling behind curtains, is Claudius, Caligula's uncle. Awkward, stammering, mocked all his life as weak and foolish, he had been spared Caligula's cruelty only because no one believed him dangerous. Now in the chaos, soldiers drag him out, and to everyone's shock they hail him emperor. The Senate protests, their dream of a restored republic crumbling. But the Guard stands firm. With Claudius in their grasp, they see their own power preserved. In the streets, soldiers march, their shields gleaming, their voices raised. Ave, Caesar Claudius! Rome hesitates. The mob, ever hungry for bread and games, accepts the new emperor. The Senate, cornered and fearful, bows to reality. The Republic dies again, its ashes smothered beneath the weight of soldiers' boots. And so from the blood of Caligula rises not freedom, but another emperor. The system he mocked, the throne he defiled endures, but the shadow of his reign lingers. Mothers whisper his name as a curse. Senators remember his laughter like a wound. The games, the feasts, the humiliations, all echo in memory, proof that Rome itself can be bent, broken, and made to kneel before madness. Caligula is gone. But the empire he twisted must now carry the scar of his rule. The years move on, yet Caligula's ghost lingers in Rome like a curse that cannot be exorcised. His name becomes shorthand for madness, cruelty, and the corruption of absolute power. Even as Claudius takes the throne and restores a measure of order, senators whisper of the horror they endured, the humiliation carved into their bones. You walk through the libraries of Rome where scrolls are copied and stored. Historians, some cautious, some vindictive, begin writing his story. Suetonius, Tacitus, Dio Cassius, their words will shape how generations remember him. They describe the feasts of roses, the incestuous embraces, the wars against seashells, the endless executions. Was every tale true, or were they sharpened exaggerations, crafted by those who loathed him? The truth dissolves into legend, but in legend his shadow only grows. To the Senate he becomes the perfect villain, proof of what happens when emperors wield unchecked power. To the people, he is remembered in fragments, the bread he gave, the games he staged, the terror he inflicted. To later emperors, his name is both a warning and a shield. Invoke Caligula and even cruelty can be excused as not as bad as him. Beyond Rome, his story spreads like wildfire. Foreign kings mock the empire that crowned such a man. Philosophers debate his madness. Was it sickness, was it poison, or was it simply the inevitable rot of power? Some even argue he was no madman at all, but a dark satirist, using cruelty to expose Rome's own corruption. And yet beneath the arguments, one truth holds: Caligula turned power itself into a theater of fear. He showed Rome that when an emperor is worshipped as a god, he can act as demon. Centuries later, ruins of the Palatine still whisper his name. Tourists stand where he feasted, imagining roses falling like suffocating snow. Scholars trace his bloodline, noting how the madness of emperors seemed to echo from him to Nero to Commodus, to others who would drape themselves in divine robes and dare the world to resist. Caligula's reign lasted only 4 years, yet those years carved themselves into history deeper than decades of wiser rulers. His cruelty outlived him, immortalized not in monuments but in memory. Rome survived him, but Rome was never the same. The palace where Caligula once reigned now lies quiet, its halls stripped of his laughter, its marble floors scrubbed of his blood. Yet silence cannot erase memory. Every column, every chamber, every hidden passage whispers still of the man who ruled as god and monster. You wander through the ruins in your mind. Imagine the feasts, the oceans of wine, the roses falling like a deadly snowfall. Imagine the fear in every senator's bow, the trembling in every courtier's laugh. Rome's heartbeat inside these walls, and for 4 years that heartbeat was wild, cruel, and intoxicating. To some, Caligula is only a mad emperor, a tyrant best forgotten. But to others, his reign is a lesson etched in stone, that unchecked power transforms man into beast and beast into legend. His cruelty was theater, but theater that killed. His pleasures were boundless, but built on despair. His divinity was hollow, but enforced with blood. Historians still argue, was he insane, poisoned by illness and paranoia? Was he simply corrupt, indulging every appetite Rome had to offer? Or was he in some dark way a mirror, reflecting the empire's own hunger for spectacle, its lust for control, its worship of domination disguised as grandeur? The truth may never be clear, but the shadow remains. Caligula's Forbidden Palace endures not in stone, but in story. in the way his name alone conjures visions of decadence, madness, and the fragility of civilization. And as you drift into silence, imagine Rome at night. The torches gutter low. The city exhales after centuries of cruelty. Yet somewhere beneath the marble dust, you can almost hear the faint echo of his laughter. Mocking, seductive, eternal. Caligula is gone. But the dark pleasures of his palace still haunt history's dreams. Now let the shadows soften. The marble corridors grow dim. The torches sputter and the laughter fades into silence. Rome sleeps at last, the fever of Caligula's reign dissolving into memory. You are no longer in the palace. You are beneath the night sky, where the stars gleam cold and eternal above the ruins. The air is cooler now, softer, carrying only the hum of distant winds. The chaos of emperors, the cries of feasts, the screams of arenas, all have sunk beneath the stillness of time. Breathe slowly. Inhale the calm. Exhale the fear. The echoes of cruelty belong to the past. The empire that once believed itself eternal is only stone now, and stone cannot hurt you. What remains is story. Fragments told in whispers, half dream, half memory. Close your eyes and let those whispers drift away. Imagine roses not suffocating, but falling gently, harmless petals carried by the breeze. Imagine marble halls not filled with fear, but with silence, each step muffled, safe. Imagine Rome itself dissolving into dust, until only the night remains, quiet, endless, embracing. The Forbidden Palace is gone. The mad emperor's voice is gone. What lingers is only you breathing, resting, letting the shadows release their grip. Sleep now as the ruins sleep. Rest as history rests. And if echoes stir in the dark, let them pass like dreams fading with the dawn. Sweet dreams,